Hello, good evening, and welcome, or whatever time of the day it is there, to episode 4 of the Culture and Justice Reform podcast, and with me, SB Parker, and Emma Wells. And this time, we're joined by Mr. John Richards, who I've known for a couple of years, and I'm going to say he's a public intellectual, but I'm going to let him argue that out now as he introduces himself to you. Hello, John.
Hi, SB. Yeah, well, I am currently the president of Atheism UK, but I'm not representing Atheism UK right now. I'm just being me, worthing skeptics in the pub. I'm a retired science teacher, and my previous job was as publications director of Atheist Alliance International. So that's just some of the things that I've been involved in.
Okay, so moving away from the sort of that you had to atheism. One of the questions I wanted to bring up with you today was the it's a new concept for me, which is victim for verdict. I wanted to try and get some insight into your thoughts about what's been going on.
Well, in my activities as a campaigning atheist, I often get involved in discussions with theists, and they like to quote the justice system as a source of how to substantiate a claim and as a source of evidence for their belief system. And I point out to them that the justice system doesn't even purport to the truth. All it is, its remit is to deliver a judgment. So inevitably, being humans that are activating this system, some of the judgments are wrong. And there are some victims of inappropriate sentences. Sometimes they have to be released from imprisonment. Sometimes they have to be compensated for damage done to their lives and their careers. So victims, yes, that's certainly appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of indicate that you're not entirely sure that the justice system is on totally good grounds at the moment. Do you want to expand upon that a bit? You hinted towards that.
Well, yeah, we thanks to modern communication methods, we get almost daily reports of instances of unsafe conviction sentences. And I mean, one where is it Canada or the US at the moment? I forget the guy's name, but he was released only yesterday after having been imprisoned for 20 years for the murder of his former girlfriend. And a judge has deemed that he should be released because more evidence has come out about his trial. And of course, we have more techniques now. We can do DNA tests on blood, and they've got, evidence going back, cloth and so on, going back all that 20 years. So a new investigation will be carried out, and possibly a new that's just one, but it happens, as I said, almost on a daily basis. So it indicates the ineffectiveness of the justice system.
It's thrown some biblical atheism bit about. During my years that I've been supporting the loved ones of those falsely accused, I've had quite strong links with fact, historically, not so much now, who are the falsely accused carers and teachers. And you're obviously on the complete opposite side of the fence. Have you ever had a connotation where you've had to link with them? Because obviously they're massive in the false accusation world. and now this is coming in from completely opposite side of the fence. So I'm finding it fascinating that there is a group of people out there who will be defending and supporting people who are non-believers. Have you ever had to merge or any interaction with them?
I haven't. No.
They are great. Yeah, they're quite a big following.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe I should look into them.
Please do.
But as for false accusations,
Yeah.
that's not uncommon, is it? In fact,
No, not at all. But for teachers and carers, it was back in. I mean, even what it hasn't changed, to be perfectly honest. But they are a target, a very vulnerable sector of society in the workplace that they found themselves in. So it's interesting that there will be you're being approached by these people on the other side of the fence, as it was, and yet there is the Christian side of it. It's an interesting debate that I've never considered. It's never come up for me before, so I find it very intriguing.
Do you know, the rules have changed?
Yes.
Because when I started teaching last century, a long time ago,
BC,
almost, yeah, one of my colleagues married one of my pupils.
Right.
There was quite a big age gap, but that you get away with that now. I mean, she must have been 16 and he must have been 20, 28 or something.
No. Yeah.
And also around the same time, the chief executive of Ofsted, I can't think of his name at the moment, but he kept it quiet that he had married, because he'd previously been a lecturer at a college or university, and he had married one of his students, but that was not publicly trumpeted very much, you know.
It is now.
So, but now of course that is completely taboo. You can't, not even in the case of consenting adults. You know, a student at a university might be considered to be an adult. Depending on which country we're talking about, it's 18 or 16 in this country, whereas in the States, many of the States is 21 or even older. So these thresholds are matters of decision, cultural decision, and they are items of fashion too. They go in and out of being acceptable. So what we used to be able to get away with. I mean, I remember when I was a schoolboy, I remember having friends who we were talking at the time of going to France, and one of them said we could sow some wild oats. You know, the idea being that you'd go to France, have your wicked way with some French girls, and then run back to the UK, escape all responsibility. And of course, we didn't do that, but of course, even thinking about this sort of thing nowadays is a big no-no.
You didn't get the chance, that's why.
Well, there you go.
It's not.
If this conversation is clipped, people could make out that I had done that.
I know they could, so let's be very careful here. I mean,
it's all kinds of things.
It's also unethically correct for anybody who's in an educational capacity to be starting having to have relationships with the children that they've taught. We have to absolutely put our hands up and say that is unethical. It's not right. It's not the right way to be.
Yeah. There is a gap of superiority of I can't think of the right word. I've been drinking too much, I think, but there is a gap which makes it difficult to justify even consent, because there is this sort of boss. There's this distance of elevation here. Boss.
Okay. So all right. I'm going to jump in, chaps, because it's getting good. If your Ofsted friend that we can talk about as an example had been sort of to 30 and his girlfriend had been 18, but she'd been to someone else's student, not his, would it be totally wrong then? But they saw each other every day in the college, but he wasn't teaching her. where's the scruple there? Is that right? Is that wrong? They're deeply in love, not just. What do you think there, John?
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Because these are decisions that have to be made by whoever is determining the regulations and the laws in the country. And really, they shouldn't be making generalized distinctions like that, because each of these cases is a case. It's a single case, and it should be treated as a single case. It's a bit like abortion, you know? Tell the government to keep their noses out of other people's genitalia, you know? We don't,
so to speak.
Leave us alone. Leave us alone. If we agree to do something, then that's no business of anybody's.
Which isn't kind of quite how the American Republican end of things sort of sees it, is it?
Not at all.
As we're going down that line, but that's another country from our experience, though of course we can talk about it all. You're going to take us to the next question then? Oh, sorry.
There you go, because what America has is, although it's nominally a secular country, what it has is politics and a religion closely entwined, much more so than we do here, although we actually have an established church.
That's perfect. Yeah. What me and John were discussing in the previous discussion, that's not wrong, but was about identifying people and the way that this is going to come out completely wrong, Sean, so you're going to have to edit it completely. About how investigations are carried out in the UK or in America or anywhere in the world, really. But I brought up the subject when we were discussing about Alice Sebold, who was the author of
The Lovely
Bones, and how in December 2021 she made her way into the headlines again because she had been part and parcel of a gentleman who had been sent to prison for 16 years, and then after that served a further 23 years on as a non-sex offender in the United States, but that the investigation at the time was so heavily flawed that he shouldn't even have been in the courtroom anyway. So we're discussing that briefly, and I wanted to, because I know quite a lot about this case, we had a quick chat about it, and it was something that I was interested to find out what your thoughts were, John.
Well, I know nothing about that case, I'm afraid.
I know, but there was an identification thing that we were talking about, whereby
was it a lineup?
It was a lineup, and she picked out number 4. Accidentally ticked box number 5, and number 5 had been the person who the police wanted to convict, and it ended up put number 5 into the courtroom, and a completely innocent man, so 39 of his life.
I laugh, but it's not a laughing matter, really.
No, it's deadly serious.
Lineups are deeply flawed. And there's been quite a lot of research that shows this. I mean, the famous one is going back to, there's a short video of some students playing with a basketball, and they're throwing the ball around. And the viewer is invited to observe this event and then respond to some questions afterwards. And while the viewer is observing, his eyes are moving with the ball and it's going from person to person, a man in a gorilla suit walks across in front of the camera. And at the end of the little scenario, the viewers are invited to say what they saw going on. And none of them, almost none of them, say they saw a gorilla go by. And that just shows how poor we are at making observations. But then there's other pieces of research on the effectiveness of lineups themselves. For example, it's been thoroughly tested and shown that a person choosing someone from a lineup chooses the person who is least like themselves. So if the selector is a white male, he's more likely to choose a young white male. He's more likely to choose an old black male because our natural bias.
I said that there are people who've had traumatic experience, and often if they're in a lineup situation, they may not remember the trauma they've been through in that 15-minute or however long it was, and they'll see somebody who resonate with a past
Yes,
traumas
yes,
experience. That
yeah.
happens an awful lot.
Yes,
An awful lot.
that too. And we've just seen an example of that with the death of our Queen, haven't we? I mean, if you looked at all the interviews of people who have been grieving, one of the first things that they say is, it reminded me of my mother's death or my grandmother's death, because we resonate between what we're observing and our memories.
Of course we do. But it's unjust for these to be allowed to be, you send the people into the courtroom based on an acceptance that that person's word is true, and we've just identified then that I could, many cases never be just never happened, did it?
Yeah. Well, this is the problem, because of human frailty. It's almost impossible to have a certain conviction.
Of course.
And
I agree.
And the result of this is that a good few people are wrongly convicted and wrongly sentenced. And that's why we have to have appeal courts. And that's why we have to release prisoners and pay compensation, because we accept from the outset that it's not going to be a very good exercise in terms of effectiveness. So we have this catch-up thing at the end where it can all be reversed.
I'm going to say 6 years, nearly 7 years I've been supporting loved ones who've been falsely accused. And in all them years, and I mean there's thousands of people who I've supported, I've only ever known 3 people to make it to the appeals court, and out of those 3 people, 2 to 1. In all them years, and all those thousands of people I've supported, that's how badly flawed our system is that these people, you can apply for an appeal all day long, but the first judge knocks it out and you're gone. You're gone.
Yes. And then you've got to, then you have to wait. You have to wait another year to reapply, and it gets knocked out, and you wait another year to reapply.
It's never ending.
The reason behind this is we would all like our justice system to be perfect. We would all, as citizens, we would all like to think that all the bad boys are locked up and all the good boys are not.
Of course.
And we don't like, therefore, we don't like admitting that our system is less than perfect. So there is resistance that makes it hard to go to appeal.
At every stage, there's a resistance.
Yes, and there's an assumption that if the justice kind of goes wrong, as you hinted that it could, John, then it goes to appeal court, and then there's the CCRC behind that, the Criminal Cases Review Committee. And the fact is that the both of those are kind of considered now inside and outside the industry to be basically stitch-ups. They don't actually work. Like the people that Emma works with, that she just doesn't see the appeals. In prison, there aren't any appeals, especially for certain kind of cases which aren't popular in the press. So there's like a stitch-up. It feels, I'm not accusing anyone of a stitch-up, but it definitely feels as if there's one organised by the head of the media and the head of the justice to make sure you can't open the floodgates to everyone appealing their conviction.
Yeah. Well, of course, as I was saying, we want to maintain this pretense that our justice system is working 100% effectively. And of course, once you've been convicted, the assumption is that you were guilty, whether you were or not.
I'm gonna ask yourselves and the viewers to do this for now, tonight, or whenever you read it, whenever you watch this. I want you to go and do that. I want you to go to the courts of justice in London, criminal cases that have been held this month. And what you'll find, what I found last month, because I've been researching it recently, in the month of September, there will have been 31 cases that will have been heard. Out of those 31 cases, 27 of them have got, the restrictions that are made, that the press can't report on them because of sexual convictions.
Yeah.
So all of these cases are getting to court, but it's the first, and then they get to the first judge, and the first judge gets it out, and that's where the problem comes from. That's where it stems from, is that everybody's appealing, everybody's saying I've been wronged, and then somebody sat there and they initially say no, and then that snowballs for the rest of that person's life in prison.
Mm.
That's where it snowballs from. And that's what's wrong. It shouldn't be. That process is unfair. It's very, very unfair.
John?
Yeah, you were saying something this morning, something interesting about judges and juries and selection thereof.
Yeah, definitely.
I found that interesting because I've actually been, because one of my former hats, I was on a local council. We used to have to license people to run clubs and drive taxis.
I've had a license.
Yeah.
I had a nightclub for 4 years. Yeah.
And on several occasions, I had to chair this panel, make these judgments and pronounce on whether this person was suitable to receive that license.
Yeah, been there.
And you know the feeling that what's it called? You feel a bit of a fraud. There's an expression for it, isn't there?
Of course, yeah, I don't know.
Imposter syndrome.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Bit of a fraud.
I've-
Unready, John, unready. Yeah.
Yes, I felt a bit like that, I must admit, when I was put in that position. I thought, I'm making decisions here which affect people's lives, and I don't know whether I'm qualified to do that, or authorized to do that, even though I'd been elected, and put in that position. I didn't volunteer. I had to stand in when people were off sick, but nonetheless,
what influenced the suggestion to yourself that you were an imposter? What was the reason for that? Somebody's got to be in judgment of another person. Them.
But I've felt that I wasn't. I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough experience. I didn't have enough qualifications, enough training. I didn't have enough.
Can we slide into the next question then? Because this is beautifully really, is that juries, as we discussed previously, I'm not going to go into any great detail about it, but I believe that juries aren't fit for purpose based on experience, lived and learned experience. And the discussion that we had was that I said that if I was king and I was ruler for the day, I'd insist that these people who were making decisions, peerage decisions on the people who were stood before them, that they should be educated to a level.
Yeah.
The jury that I've sat on personally, there were 2 people who couldn't string together a coherent English sentence. I found it disturbing, to say the least. So I'd like to go a little bit further into that with you if I can.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we do now have standards of English competence for doctors and other medical workers in the NHS. They have to pass quite a stringent, quite a rigorous test, because of course they're interacting with patients, many of whom won't be that eloquent themselves, and so they need explanations to be very clear to them. So I don't see why we shouldn't have the same sort of standards for other professions or positions of decision making, like being on a jury.
The thing is that 12 people sit on a jury. Juries sit week on week, 52 weeks a year. Yeah, it's constant. How many courts are there in the UK? I think there's about 172. It's something ridiculous. There's a ridiculous amount of magistrates
and of course
how can you possibly maintain what we've discussed? They're allowing people to go into these courtrooms, make these decisions without, I don't want to sound awful, but without even being English. So how can we trust that system works?
Well,
with law?
I don't mind whether they're English or not, but what I mind is whether they're able to speak, communicate English.
Yeah.
And
I'll edit that.
and I saved you from that one, Emma.
Thank you.
And I think, as I said, for other professions, you wouldn't get to be a lawyer if you couldn't speak English, and the same standards should apply to other members of a court, surely.
Important day in folk like Sean's life, and those 12 people are making that decision. And if they can't form a coherent English sentence, they shouldn't be making those decisions, in my opinion. They certainly shouldn't. It's difficult enough, if you've got a grasp of English, to understand what is being said in the courtroom, because they're all talking twaddle, aren't they? So there should be a basic level of understanding, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That's what
I would agree with that. I'd like to see that brought in.
yeah.
And it's, as I said, it's the same expectation of certain professions.
Yeah.
And obviously, you don't need to have a good command of English in order to collect the dust, for example. A very worthy job, mind you. We'd hate for that to stop. But you certainly do need to have that for professions which are based on communication. You know, I mean, communication is paramount in jobs like medical positions, educational positions, governmental positions.
Is communication. The whole function of a criminal trial is communication.
So that there should be a standard required,
Yeah.
and therefore the list of jurors should not be the whole population. It should be the whole population educated to that level.
And of course, it's a bit sort of hard for it to be the whole population when a third of the country has a criminal record, and you can't have a criminal record on a jury. They're not going to have very many people to go from, so you know they. But
No. Well, that's very true, Jack.
That's a good point.
I never thought.
Anyway,
Right,
I'm just going to push us on for the last couple of minutes, John, because as usual we've rattled away. But I wanted to get your thoughts, your esteemed thoughts on woke cancel culture. To coin a phrase, I don't like saying the word woke anymore. Have you ever been cancelled, old boy? Ever happened to you?
Only online, I think. I mean, I've been cancelled from Facebook groups, but I regard that as a badge of honour.
You regard it as a badge of honour?
It is a badge of honour. Yeah, you're right, mate.
In fact, when I was cancelled by this particular Facebook group, I asked the admin if she could give me a badge, a bad boy badge, because I wanted that. Anyway, no, I haven't been seriously cancelled, but the trouble with woke is, like a lot of things, it started out, I think, with good intentions of making people aware of abuse. But then the pendulum doesn't stop, does it? So it swung into the fundamental woke end, and now it's a witch hunt. That's all it is. It's a witch hunt. And I only want one authorized jurisdiction in this country. I don't want multiple other people having their own standards of judgment and execution. I mean, they appoint themselves into the role of policeman, judge, jury, warder to prison officer. You know, who gives them that power?
Yeah. And what's the answer to that question? Because I think you know, don't you? So tell us. I think you suspect.
I think he does.
I think they've been discredited now. I think woke is past its best. I think it's ceasing to carry the impact that it used to. So just ignore. Don't engage in them. Just ignore them. Let them get on with their own little crowd.
How do you recruit an army, though, to enforce what you've just said? Ignore them when all the media propaganda is in their favour, is in the woke favour. How on earth do you move forward from that? How do you combat it?
Well, do you know what I'd like? I'd like the same rules that apply in real life to apply online. For example, in real life, it's quite difficult to have a false identity, because in order to have a bank account, a credit card or debit card, you have to have a name and an address and a photo on your license and so on. And you can't have multiple identities. It's very difficult to go about as 24 different people, because that is actually criminal.
Yes.
Misrepresentation. And why do we have this license to kill in online situations? It's like saying you can be a foreigner abroad, you know, like the boys who wanted to go to France and leave their seeds behind, sowing their seeds. We shouldn't have that. That shouldn't be an option.
Thank you for the wrap up. Thank you for Thank you for the
It's
perfect
fabulous,
perfect ending there, John. Getting back to France, I love it. It's about to go off. Thank you very much. We'll see
meeting
you on the next one. All right, lovely Westminster behind you. Good stuff. Bye.
You're
Take care.
welcome.
All right. See you, love. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.